Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to the Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
City Zero is over. It's time to eat your head.
Мне один купейный до Москвы.
Билетов нет.
Да мне все равно какой, СВ, плацкартный.
Никаких нет.
А где у вас начальник вокзала?
Начальник не поможет.
Торт?
Andy, it's a new year. I guess it's already been a new year as we record this, right?
It's been a new year for a little while now. Yes, it has.
But, it's still a new year, and as long as we're going to leverage new year stuff, it's time to reflect on the old year. And our partners at Letterboxd have a fantastic way to do just that.
You know, what's great about Letterboxd is they have, when you're a member and you you're a paid member of either the pro or patron membership level, you get your stats page, and you can find out all sorts of interesting bits about, what you watched over your whole time on Letterboxd or any individual year. And it's really interesting to look back and see not just like how many movies you watched and how many movies you rewatched, but also like, how many countries have you seen movies from? What years have you seen more movies from than other years? What genres are you typically favoring? They have a whole thing with like list progress, where they list all sorts of different lists, like the Letterboxd Top 250, AFI 100 Years, 100 Movies, Edgar Wright's 1,000 Favorite Movies. And it gives you your progress on all of those different lists. It also gives you like stars and directors and crew and studios and all these different things, so you can see which actor, which director have I seen in more projects than any other. And it's really interesting. There's just a lot of interesting stuff that you get when you're at those levels, so you can really dig into all of that. I mean, I know people who use that to say, okay, I'm going to try to see, one movie at least from every country in the world, things like that, or look at it and say, okay, I've seen too many films from this director. Who can I watch some more films from so that I can bump that director out of my top 20 directors?
Are you movie watching that's like rage watching? What are you doing?
There is somebody that is in the Flick Charges group. Anyone who's listening to this and follows that group knows there's a particular person who really is unhappy that Ron Howard ended up in his top 20 directors and is doing everything in his power. He's trying to watch more films from other directors to bump Ron Howard out.
That's fantastic. What is your average? I don't want to out you for how many movies you've watched, but in your Letterboxd stats, you do have a block for films by week, and I'm curious what your 2020 average films per week was.
2020. Well, let me open that up, and I will tell you.
You didn't even have it open?
I was looking at my A Life in Film page, not my 2020 page. But my Life in Film, I have seen, at least that I've accounted for, 4,831 films. And that includes short films, because there are a lot of short films in here. So
that's the all-time tab. Is that's what it is. So
yeah,
I'm at 2942.
And I bet you're close. I bet you're closer to me than that. It's just you have not gone through.
I'm not closer to you in your addiction to stats, but I am probably closer to you than that.
Yes, in your total number. I bet if you went through Letterboxd and you added every single thing you've seen.
Okay. So this is what I want to know. For your this 2020 average films per week.
Yes.
What is it?
Average films per week, 8.8.
8.8 films per week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'm not there.
Well, you're also you're a little lax on your entries.
I'm very lax. It's so disappointing looking at this. This is why you become a member, is because of the delight in actually tracking all the things that you watch, and to stifle the regret you feel when you haven't been tracking the films that you watch. Because I'm at like 1.6, and that's not accurate.
That's pretty light for you.
That is very light.
Yeah.
So go back to your Life in Film. One more stat I want to know from you.
Okay.
What is the highest number in your films by release year that you have ever watched?
In any particular year?
Yeah. So it has this funny little bar graph, and it goes from 1896 to 2021 with a nice little bar graph, and there is going to be one year that's higher than the rest. What is it?
Mine goes from 1878, because apparently I've seen something in 1878.
1878?
Yeah. I have a feeling
I was flexing with 96.
I have a feeling it was the horse, whatever's the oscilloscope, where you watch the horse galloping. I think that's probably what it was. But if I look, I had a couple big years in the late 90s, but then it looks like 2016 really shot ahead, and that's at 138 films from 2016 that I've seen. Mine
is 2013. And I don't know what it is about 2013. I was looking at it in the first film apparently that I guess this is by release date. The first films I watched that were released in 2013 Nymphomaniac Volumes 1 and 2, which I think you probably
avoided.
This is the kind of stuff you get at letterboxd.com. That's a fantastic service. If you visit thenextreel.com/letterboxd, that will redirect you straight to our Letterboxd partner page where you can sign up for either pro or patron with a 20% discount. And you can join the fun at Letterboxd. And, you know, if you're a member of our community, you can reach out to me in our Discord community, and I'll even add your Letterboxd reviews profile to our automation so that your reviews will automatically drop into our Letterboxd reviews channel for 2 Reeler members. And that's another fun way to share your reviews and make sure that that you're getting the proper notice for all of your hard movie watching work.
Absolutely.
We'd love to have your support at Letterboxd and over at the Next Reel. And it's just like it's an Oreo cookie of goodness. Okay, Andy. We're going to...
Zero grad.
Zero grad. First of all, I'll just get this out of the way. This movie made me want to watch Brazil again hard.
It is. There are certain movies where this fits into, and what it did for me is, like, I felt like I was watching a David Lynch film. Like, nothing made sense in this strange world, and I was like, "What is happening here?" And it just felt so Lynchian throughout. And I think Gilliam-esque. We've never determined what Gilliam's would be.
I don't think we have. Is it just Gillish? This movie takes place in and is made in and talking about a really interesting time in that sort of the gap years between Soviet and post-Soviet Russia, and I think that I'm like you. I had no idea what was going on during the movie, like nothing. But it starts to come into focus as you start reading a little bit about it and thinking about the context under which this film was made, and that makes it, I think, a much more interesting film. Yes, there's a lot of absurdity in the movie, but it is representative of things that people living in these cities at this time might have been feeling, right? That now that I'm past watching the movie, I sort of I get it. I understand possibly they're confused. They're just day-to-day buckle shuffle, workaday confusion at how to live. Like, how do you move forward from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. on any given day? And for that, I think this film is fascinating.
Especially because they're, as you know, our protagonist here, who is very much kind of representative of the kind of the general Soviet populace at the time. Mm-hmm. A lot of the different characters in the film represent really kind of the two different sides of kind of the way things were, where you have some people who are very much still of the old school mindset, and then you have some people who are more of the more modern mindset. And our character just is lost in the shuffle between all of that, and it just, it doesn't really feel like he has a place. And it was it was one of those films where you watch and you're like, what is happening? I just didn't really get it. But looking at some articles and stuff afterward, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes a lot more sense now. It did feel like at times there were elements within this film that probably would have made a lot more sense if I had been a Soviet at the time watching this, because especially the museum scene, I just felt like I don't know what any of this represents. I feel like there's something here. I don't know if it's just a lot of in-jokes. I don't know if it's a very pointed social commentary. It was just a lot of Russian stuff. It was just like, I'm not quite sure.
Well, a lot of Russian stuff. And I mean, how did you know? Do you know when you realize that there's something going on that you didn't understand?
Well, I mean, initially I was like, okay, well, obviously this is like an alternative facts type of museum, because the first thing that he shows is like this coffin from the Trojan era, when the Trojans had moved up to Russia afterward, as he said, and here are his remains. You have this coffin, so I was like, okay, well, this is going to be kind of a tour of a lot of falsehoods throughout this museum. But then there were some elements, and like the rock and roll stuff, I was like, okay, well, that's obviously a bit of fiction here. But then there were some things where they were talking about some generals and some different things, and I was just like, okay, is this something that really happened? Like, I just didn't know some of those sorts of elements.
Yeah. Right. And what's interesting about all of that for me, it was the Romans, and I thought that was really, really funny. And I realized that over the next like 3 or 4 minutes of film, I'm missing like 1,000 in jokes. But where it plays with, I think, some of the cultural history and the challenges of cultural history is in the stuff like the rock and roll. Like, we know that there's no reason to believe that there is any like truth to the actual events, but what it represents is the introduction of outsider cultural elements into this system that had been closed for so long, and people had to figure out how to engage in these new elements without fear. And that, I think, is a fascinating thing, particularly when you look at one of my very favorite sequences in the movie is the older versions of everybody are now in the dance hall.
Oh, when the new dance hall is opening up, dedicated to the chef, because he was the one who first danced rock and roll in the 50s.
Exactly, in 1957. And so here we have all of these people that we've seen throughout the movie. And let me just say, are like from a scene structure, from an architecture perspective, it's great. They move the camera through and they block all of these characters so perfectly, so effortlessly, that it just feels totally natural that we would see all of these faces when we see them. And yet I was surprised at every single turn. I thought, oh, that's great. I remember him from like 20 minutes ago, and he was there, and hey, you were there. Like, it was just really smart directing. But I just love that sequence because they're all figuring out how to, they've all figured out how to embrace rock and roll. And it's this guy this outsider who comes in, who's like kind of shy about the fact that, yeah, he's danced rock and roll before, and he's embarrassed now being on stage, but this community has totally now embraced it. And they're all, the one thing they want him to do is stand on stage and dance rock and roll, because they all think he's the son of the first dancer of rock and roll in their city. Which is just like, all of that is great for me. I had a blast with that kind of stuff.
It was all very fun stuff. And it just keeps going, because then you have his, what was he, the prosecutor general, or I believe, who is, he's the one who tells Varikin not to leave town, because this is actually a lot bigger. It's not just a suicide. It's a lot bigger. It's a murder story. And it kind of spirals from there with this whole suicide of the chef and all this sort of stuff, which absolutely we have to talk about because it's so crazy. Yeah. But then at this dance thing, it's like he is the one who, as we had learned, opposed the chef when the chef danced rock and roll back in 1957, which led to kind of him getting removed from his military service and all this sort of stuff. And the girl, she swallowed acid because she was so distraught with all the stuff that happened back then. And now he's the one who still can't move forward. And his solution is to get on stage and try killing himself, which fails because his gun doesn't work at all. Which I just couldn't help but feel like there were a lot of other elements that they were kind of pointing out, with the fact that this is the one person who can't do it, and he can't just kill himself to get away from it. It's like he's stuck there, I just found it to be a really interesting way to kind of bring that sequence to kind of a head.
Well, and just like Breakin, like he was stuck there, and we've seen all like the entire movie. It's like, you're never going to leave. You're going to die here. We have the little fortune-telling kid who says, you're going to die here. You can't get out of the city. You're going to die in 2015 or whatever it was, and it'll be here. And then and this was a surprise to me, when he stands on stage and puts the gun to his temple and tries to shoot it, and then takes the cartridge out and it's full of rounds, and he puts it back in and he tries to do it again and it does not work. I was torn with how to feel about that. Was that a commentary on a breakdown of manufacturing in post-Soviet Russia? Because we need to talk about the air conditioning backs in just a minute. Or was that insinuating some sort of fantasy mysticism around you can never leave? Like, everybody is stuck there. Even the gun won't work when you try to get out by killing yourself. And maybe it's somewhere in between. I don't know. Do you have any sense?
That was something else. And I guess this is why I say it's Lynchian, because it has a lot of these things happen that aren't necessarily explained. Like, also, the secretary licks her lips because it's almost like she's turned on when he's trying to kill himself. So there are odd things like that.
That was the most Lynchian of Lynchian moments.
I'm like, I don't quite get what these are. Yeah. And so it does make me think about it and talk about it and stew over it. And that excites me in a film, even if I can't always figure out what it means. But I like what you're saying about the possibility that it's representative of the society, and how, it's not something you can get away from. It's something that you're going to have to you just deal with. So it's an interesting way to explore all of this with such odd kind of surrealist imagery.
So because the gun relates, let's jump into the air conditioner sequence in the beginning real quick. So he's sent to the city because he works for a company that takes air conditioning units from this company that is located in this city.
His whole reason for coming.
Right. The whole reason. That gets him to town. He gets on the train, he comes to town. It's a rainy town. He comes in and he goes to the office because he needs to talk to them about the back panels on the air conditioners. And the reason he has to talk to them is because they are no longer subsidized by the state, which is a big deal, right? That's kind of a hidden sort of a linchpin to the whole story, right? That it is another example, or it is our first example of things falling apart, right? Under glasnost, under changes in culture, changes in business, changes in state support, all of these things. That's our first hint that things are kind of, well, maybe not our first hint. It happens during their conversation. The first hint, he walks into the office and the secretary in the office is stark naked, sitting there like nothing is wrong in the world.
Right.
And she's typing away, answering the phone, taking papers.
Yeah, no one else, the other person who comes in doesn't notice it at all.
Right?
It's only Varikin who notices it.
Right. And he's obviously he's an outsider. He is shocked by this strange happening, but he manages his way through the engagement with her and gets in to talk to the manager. And in their conversation, we find out that not only does the company not have an immediate answer, they don't have an immediate answer because their chief engineer drowned 8 months ago and nobody knew it but the secretary,
right.
Which is another great example of things falling apart. Like, when there is no authoritarian state overseeing the jobs of every person, it's that you can go 8 months without knowing you don't have a chief engineer, because everybody they were in this sort of liminal space. They didn't know, they didn't care, they didn't understand, whatever. It is things falling apart. And I thought that was particularly curious.
It also made me think of Chernobyl and the way that people would choose not to say things, or would choose not to report something or force something to happen because of something, because they needed to keep moving. It had that sort of vibe as well, where they just got to keep this company moving, and so the fact that the chief engineer drowned, we can't stop moving because of that. So we're just going to keep plugging along and just just pretend it didn't happen, and we're going to put on this front like everything's normal. Like it had that sort of air as well.
Well, and the fact that it's okay for us not to change, right? Because the implication of not having a chief engineer is not being able to change anything in their manufacturing line. And
Right.
that he in this leadership position was okay with everything, as you say, just being normal to him. And so I think that's an interesting insight on this. In fact, there are a couple of those weird, lascivious Lynchian looks, like the one we talked about with the potential suicide scene. There's another one here with the naked secretary. She doesn't lick her lips, but I don't think it's any less weird.
No, when he comes out after talking to the head of the company, she's standing and she's over by the window watering all the plants with her pitcher, and she's kind of like pouring the water into her hand and kind of using that to kind of drizzle the water and everything. And he's watching her like, I know, it's such a weird moment because you could tell he's just looking at her like, I have no idea what is going on here. And she just turns and looks at him and just has kind of a stare for a moment. And I'm like, okay, that's the whole thing. It wasn't like a sexual look. It wasn't like, why are you staring at me sort of look. It was just kind of just returning his stare. And it was a weird little moment that lasted longer than I would have expected. Yeah.
Longer than it, sort of quote should have.
Yes.
It felt very strange.
Right.
A number of those things in the movie. I think that our setup there, that manufacturing's falling apart, that he came all the way to the city only to walk out having the director telling him, come back in 2 weeks. We'll see you in 2 weeks. We'll have a new chief engineer. I promise that it's going to take him 2 weeks.
Don't worry about it.
There is no second person already in charge, right? Like, shouldn't there be somebody who just steps up? No, it's going to take us 2 weeks to figure that out.
Yeah. And just speaking to just that and the nature of kind of the pace and everything and these decisions, 2 weeks and all this sort of stuff, it also speaks to just the overall pace of the film, because right from the beginning, it's a really leisurely paced film. Like the director very purposefully has long takes. Like you're watching when he arrives on the train. You're staring at him get off, but then he leaves frame. The train leaves. The camera is just like kind of lingering at the station, and it's an odd shot, just kind of watching the train roll away. And same thing with when the cab's out front, like it's a shot of just his briefcase sitting in a foggy, rainy street for a bit before he walks back in and picks his briefcase back up, and then a cab pulls up. And it's just like there's a lot of these real leisurely paced scenes, even the hotel, like everything. And it seems almost disinterested in whether he's in the frame or not. Like we're not following him. He's not the purpose of what we're looking at. Like in his hotel room, it like drifts over to something else and it's just sitting on some like the corner of the room for a bit. It seems like it's trying to figure out, what to focus on almost. And that's kind of how it feels like, even in these conversations and in these scenes where they're exchanging looks or just talking about the amount of time things will take. Everything seems to have that same sort of pace.
But he's sort of an accidental protagonist in a movie about something else. That's much more sort of institutional. It is a movie that I think successfully and comedically demonstrates a largely sort of community malaise. In just the shots that he chooses to capture, the wet streets, the dog running through. I mean, it's just all of that stuff it's kind of filled with fatigue and a little bit of sadness and
very gray, very bleak.
Yeah. And yet the people seem to be happy enough.
That's the thing. I think people generally seem happy, but I just think in general, he's the only one who notices anything happening. Everyone else who's in it seems like they're part of this, false machine that this town has become.
Yeah.
Just kind of moving through whatever it is they're doing, whether it's, whether they're happy or not, because it seems like life is going on, when we meet the author. I mean, he seems chipper. The engineer at the museum, he and his wife seem fine with their weird little kid. Everyone seems totally I don't know if normal is the right word, but they seem like they're progressing with their lives as if nothing is out of the ordinary.
Okay, out of the ordinary. You mentioned the museum again, and I forgot a point. Was there a reason beyond budgetary that all of the people, all of the figures in the diorama that he's walking through were real people? With the exception of, I think, a few cardboard cutouts, but most of them were real people. I expected something to happen, and nothing ever really happened.
Yeah, I think it was purely a budgetary thing. I kept thinking the same thing. In fact, my thought when I was watching this is like, oh, I bet this is going to end with him now being added to this weird museum made of real-looking people. But I think, but I think you're right. I think it was largely a budgetary thing. I mean, making a wax museum is a fairly challenging thing to kind of accomplish. You know, that's a lot of work to make all these actual wax statues and things. So I think that they just dressed everybody up to look like wax. And but I thought it was interesting because there is actually a point where Verikin, who, as he's watching and looking at these different dioramas that they're passing through, he's just still staring at them and has kind of a waxy look on his own face. Yeah. And I was just like, okay, that's interesting. Are we saying that, you know, he himself is as much a part of this as they are of reality? And that, you know, it's almost like they're all looking at each other in some strange fashion. But I don't think it was anything creepy. Like I never saw eyes moving to watch him or anything like that.
I didn't either. It was just occasionally you'd catch somebody breathing, you'd catch him wobbling.
Yeah.
As they're
some people were better than others.
Yeah. And the kids at the end, they're kids looking up, and I think one of them yawned and took a bite of a candy bar. Like, okay, we get the intent. So we're a half hour into it. We haven't talked about the restaurant scene yet, but I feel like we need to get into that.
Yeah. So he's decided, okay, well, I'm going to come back. I'm going to try to get a train to Moscow. I'm going to go eat. And when he's eating, first of all, he walks like right after he orders. And another couple comes in and sits down, and his waiter turns around and said, "I'm sorry, but it's break time now." And he escorts them out and then locks the door, essentially. And then a band starts playing.
Behind a hidden wall.
Behind a hidden wall, as our protagonist is eating his food. And then the waiter brings out his tea and a cake. And he specifically had said, I don't want dessert. But he said, oh, it's a cake. The chef made it for you. It's free. He looked at you and felt, I can't remember what he said, but your face was so, here he said, our chef baked it especially for you. He likes the look of you. There he is. He says he finds you sympathetic.
Yeah. And he's peeking. There he is peeking at you around the corner. And there he is. There's that cut too, the chef peeking around the corner.
Because when they reveal the cake, it is a cake made of Varikin's head. And they cut a quadrant out of it and put it on a plate for him. And he says, I'm not hungry. I don't want to. I'm leaving. And he says, don't do it. If you do it, the chef said he'll kill himself. And he's like, oh, this is nonsense. And he starts leaving. And then he hears a gunshot, turns around. The chef has shot himself in the chest and falls over and dies. And, and that's just such a strange moment. And, then another waitress comes in and screams. And then we find out later through the prosecutor. Now the prosecutor thinks that this was actually a murder and paints this whole scenario of how it's actually a murder designed to have Varikin see it and think it's a suicide, and goes through the whole, which I thought was interesting, of the replay, almost as if Varikin is talking to him about it, and then pauses. And it's a freeze frame as they talk about it. And then the prosecutor kind of spins his own version of how these other chefs were actually trying to kill this chef. And
so many chef assassination plots, which is amusing. The other thing is that they're trying to say that the chef is actually Varikin's father.
Which, that also comes out, right?
When the chef and Varikin they look roughly the same age.
Well, and that was one of those things. I was like, okay, I think it's just one of those things where they're just casting the person. And because he also was the one in the 1957 film and in the museum And I think that they were just trying to make him look younger there and make him look a little older when he was the chef. So yeah, it was one of those weird things.
You don't think there was a play on just sort of the because I'm watching this thing and I'm thinking this is that's absurd. There is no way those two people are related, and yet they're going to try to push this story because they need it to fill a convenient hole in the police state that is hanging on by its fingernails to its old reality.
Yeah, right.
Right? Like there is some sort of a statement to be made there for me.
Yeah, like you're connected.
And that's why the guy tries to kill himself, because he doesn't have anything left to hold on to. Like, he realizes how ridiculous all of this is. And yet everybody, I mean, it's an emperor has no clothes story, and everybody is staring at each other and they don't notice.
Yeah.
So
it's a weird little scene. It's an odd one about, the idea of imagery. And here he is, like, with this offer to eat this image of himself, and this whole idea of, what's that saying? And it just, I don't know. I think that there was a lot of interesting stuff going on here in this particular scene about just kind of this nature of, I don't know, just the absurdity of just the way everything was playing out, and this need to kind of craft an image, almost like who are we, and force this ideal that you are a son of this new Russia sort of thing. And so it really intriguing and really creepy.
Well, we gotta, I mean, I feel like that takes us to the last sort of big moment of the film that is sort of representative of the same thing, right? Letting go, being able to let go of the old in favor of the new, and what the old has become, and that is their time at the tree that they say is 1,200 years old, and it has been it's a tree where if somebody takes a piece of it, they become the leader, and in order to become the leader after them, you have to kill them and take a piece of your own tree. I'm sure I've got the mechanics wrong there.
Yeah. Well, it was all because some famous general had sat under this tree and all this sort of stuff. And we should just preface this, because I think that this scene is as important as the scene right before, which precedes it, when they're all in Varakin's room, and he's in his room, and then the mayor and I can't remember what, the councilman or something, come over to talk to him, and the prosecutor comes in, and his boss, or not his boss, but the owner of the factory comes in, and then these three women who had called him come in to party, and the neighbors come in because they hear music, and it's just like this endless flow of people coming into this room. That it was the woman that had danced with the chef back in the 50s comes in with her son. That was the first couple that comes in, and because she wants to talk to him and all this sort of, and pass on some heirlooms. And it was just such a strange scene to kind of, like, everybody just keeps arriving, and it's like everybody found something important about and some draw to this character. Like, they all needed to be in his presence, and they all needed to kind of have their moment and sing the songs and all this sort of strange stuff, which leads to the scene at the tree, which is, it's all kind of leading into that, and the idea of leadership, and what I was like, what are they saying? That in order to be the leader, you need to take a branch from this, and then everybody wants a branch, and everybody gets a branch.
Well, because he tries to take the little branch, this incredibly symbolic tree, and the entire giant limb falls and nearly crushes him. And then everybody jumps on it as the police guy, who's now wearing a bright yellow coat, sport coat, which I think is very funny, and says it's rotten. And what an incredible symbol that is, just like that nobody recognizes that this 1,200-year-old tree is dead. This symbol of their history is dead and has fallen to the ground, and all they want is a souvenir of that history. There's just no respect in this scene for what that thing really is, and it ends up being played as comedy. And I think that's fascinating, the way that's played off. And then, of course, the prosecutor says, run.
Right.
You need to just run.
Yeah.
And so Barakin runs. And does he get out? He's in a boat. He finds a boat. He pushes off and has no oars.
He runs through till morning. He gets in. He finds I don't know if it's a river or a lake, but a body of water with a boat, hops in, no oars, pushes off. And we end with him floating in the water in the fog, basically just floating in nothingness with no way to direct himself.
How'd you feel about that?
It was a very sharp ending. Like, clearly the filmmaker is saying something here. This is a person who is lost adrift in a fog of nothingness. Like, what is the future? Is he truly going to end up still stuck in this town until he dies in 2015, like the little kid had predicted? Or is he going to escape? Or is it just, this is the feeling that people in Russia have at this time, where they're just like, you know what? Who knows? We don't know anymore. We just don't know anymore where any of us are going, what the point is, how things are going to shake out. And we're just going to have to see. I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, we stand rudderless before you, world. We stand rudderless. I thought it was great. I do want to, one point I wrote down, and I'm just checking the time on it. If you go back to the hotel room, at about an hour 20, it starts with this single shot that does not move. And I'm now at an hour 27, and the girls are singing, and the guys from next door have now come in, and we still haven't changed shots. Hour 27 and a half, like, it's still playing.
Yeah.
That's a long, long shot. And I think it's a fascinating structure, because it starts with, it's pretty open with Varekin and the woman sitting on the opposite sides of the couch, because we've already established where they are. And then the room feels like it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller as so many people show up, and they have guitars.
And then they ask him to sing, and he starts singing a song that everybody jumps into, and really interesting. I also really thought it was, I was like, what are they saying here? When he wants to speak to the mayor, because the mayor seems like maybe he can actually help him get out of this town. He's like, can we speak privately? And the mayor's like, yeah, sure. Can we maybe go into the hallway and do it? And then the mayor just looks at him.
Nothing.
And
It's
everybody
so
stands completely still, like, I'm not moving. Such a strange moment. And then, of course, more people come in and kind of interrupt the whole thing. But
and everything that people do in the room is weird and kind of rude. Like, the girls actually bring a dish of meatballs, right? Meat dumplings.
Yeah.
And so the mayor grabs a spoon and tucks in. He sits down and starts eating by himself. There are like 10 other people in the room, and he's not sharing. The guys from next door bring beer, and he takes the beer and opens it in 2 cups and doesn't share with the guys who brought it.
Yeah.
Like, it's just 2 cups for the... it's ridiculous. I'm now at an hour 29... hour 29 and a half, hour 29:30, and that's the first time the shot moves, and they all leave.
Yeah, that's when they decide to go out to the tree. Yeah.
Nearly a 10-minute shot of just them in the room. It didn't feel like 10 minutes at the time.
No, and actually, I didn't even remember that it was a single shot. Like, that was another one where I just, because so many odd things kept happening, I guess in my head, I just kept thinking that it's just other elements of the story. And in my head, I was thinking there were cuts. But yeah, I'm not surprised now that there weren't. Interesting. Very interesting way to tell the story.
Yeah. Fascinating. Any other big moments you want to talk about, or shall we start running through some names?
Well, I just want to go back to the skind fiction angle of this, because it is part of the Soviet science fiction. And I just don't know if it is. I mean, I find it to be really kind of a fantastical mystery that is, like I said, Lynchian. It is very, it feels very much like, I don't want to say it's a social commentary so much, but it is really, I mean, it is a social commentary. It's just done in this kind of absurdist sort of way where nothing makes sense. It feels like a dream. It's one of those films that feels like a dream. I don't know if we can call it science fiction, since nothing comes across as anything that says it's science fiction.
A lot of fiction, not a lot of science.
Right.
I struggle with that, and I think that's probably why because I mean, neither has seen the movie, and before we picked it, and but it is one of those movies that doesn't really fit the science fiction thing. It's a fantasy, but there's no, and that's why I kept wanting around every corner. I was like, okay, when's the science part?
Yeah, when is it going to turn out that it's a robot town or something?
Yeah, just give me one single robot, just a robot with skis,
right? But I mean, it didn't bother me that it wasn't science fiction because, like the other two films in this series, it definitely felt like we are using these films to comment on what is happening in Russia. I mean, this one certainly is later. This one's coming out in the time of I mean, Gorbachev was in power, and there was the whole perestroika thing, and the glasnost, and definitely this film is looking at what that means to Russia and the Soviet Union. And I found that to be really interesting, the way that everything was constructed and told. So while it isn't necessarily science fiction, I do find it to be a really interesting view and insight into Soviet, just kind of the way that thought was about kind of their society at the time. Very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Interesting director Karen Shakhnazarov is he said he actually said that he lamented a little bit the fall of the Soviet censorship board, because in absence of a market economy of film to replace it, it made filmmaking in Russia very, very difficult. And I think that's an interesting perspective, because this movie was made in those gap years, right? Which is like after, the movie could not have been made 3 years prior because of what it's talking about, right? What it's all about. And its level of commentary is very high. And yet, it is challenging to get it made and get it seen because there's limited other infrastructure. And so I think that's interesting.
This is one where I really wish that I could have found some information about how it did at the box office, like especially the Soviet box office. Was this something that people flocked to? Was it something that was popular and people were really drawn to? I couldn't find that information, but how interesting would it have been to see what they thought of it at the time?
Yeah, truly.
He was awarded just a year after this, even though we're not calling this science fiction per se. Shakhnazarov did win an award by the European Science Fiction Society as in 1989 for Best Author and Screenwriter in the Soviet Union at Eurocon. So I think that while this film may not necessarily fit in with what our expectations are for science fiction or what we were thinking the film would be, perhaps part of that is because Shakhnazarov is somebody who has done a bit in the science fiction realm, and maybe that's why.
Yeah, right.
So,
I really liked his. I appreciated his direction, his choices. I mean, we've talked about some of the tools that he employs in putting the film on frame. I really liked it. I haven't seen anything else that he's done, but I'm interested in exploring some more.
Yeah, he still is an active filmmaker. I mean, he most recently made a film in 2017 called Anna Karenina Vronsky's Story. So
he's born in 1956, Andy. He's not that much older than we are.
He's 68. I'm not that close to him.
All right. So Aleksandr Borodyansky was co-screenwriter on this one. It was very busy. They've worked together a number of times on some other projects, but Borodyansky has written, he's got 53 writing credits and is currently filming Bansu right now, another film that he has written. So he's a very busy pen.
Yeah.
This is one of those where I feel like I feel like I can say he's a solid writer, screenwriter. I just wish I got more of the jokes, like the
And that's, I think, that's going to be a challenge, I think, with films like this. And I know there are other films like this around the world. In fact, I'm sure there are some from the U.S. where you watch it, and especially when it comes to social commentary, if it's critiquing a very specific period or a country or a thing like that, it's going to definitely make sense to those people who are in it, and maybe people outside of it who have looked into it and have read about it. But I think the larger populace, especially as you watch this without, like, if we had been talking about this without having looked up anything, I think it would be a very different conversation. It would have been like, what was going on with this thing? Like, this is definitely one of those films that makes more sense once you have read a little bit about it and understand it. So I absolutely think that Shakhnazarov and Borodyansky do a great job of crafting this really peculiar story and this strange world that Varakin has entered. But yeah, it is one of those that you do need to kind of have some background for. What did you think of Leonid Filatov, who played Varakin?
He's so great. What a terrific everyman, right? Like, I feel like we need him as the straight man for all of the weirdness that's going on around him. And from the moment he sees the naked secretary, you realize, like, you're in good hands in that stead. He is just sort of a introverted, nebbishy Joe Nobody. And he is our vessel for this city. And the camera doesn't particularly care that much about him. Like you already said, like, it doesn't matter if he's in the scene or not. And so I really liked him.
I thought he was fantastic. He was such a great face. I mean, he was one of those actors that is like, I wonder if he's still around, because I'd love to see him in more stuff. But no, he did pass away at the age of 56 in 2003. Interestingly, his Wikipedia entry says he was a Soviet and Russian actor, director, poet, and pamphleteer. What is a pamphleteer? Someone who writes and distributes pamphlets?
Andy, you said that, and I had a brief glimpse of our future.
Are we going to become pamphleteers? Is that
I sort of feel like pamphleteering, like podcasting is the new pamphleteering anyway.
Oh, here you go. Pamphleteer, a writer of pamphlets, especially ones of a political and controversial nature.
There you go.
Yes, indeed.
There you go.
Yes, indeed.
Here lies Andy Nelson, podcaster and pamphleteer. It's got a ring to it.
It does. If I can put Mouseketeer on there too, then that's all I would need.
That's good. Who else stuck out to you?
I think the rest of the faces work really well in context of the story. I don't know if any of them are ones that I would just want to shout out to, because I think that they all did fine in their roles. Whether it was the cook that he was determined to be the son of, or the writer, or the prosecutor, or the factory director, or Anna, or the engineer, or whoever it was. Like, I felt like everybody they did a great job of being in on the joke in this peculiar little film. So I liked the rest of the faces, but I really think that Filatov is the standout, because he is our surrogate in context of this story.
Camera, Nikolai Nemolyaev.
Wow, we almost got that. I don't know.
Not really.
I don't know how you'd say that either. Yeah.
He would not have turned his head if I'd screamed that in a crowded subway.
Speaking to how Shakhnazarov structured the script, I really think that Nemolyaev shot the film really well. Just a lot of kind of the grays, and just like the way that the color scheme worked, everything. It was a beautifully kind of simple in its kind of plain, boring city vibe to everything, that also managed to make all the weird moments they felt even that much more amplified. I thought, very successful.
I think that the thing that we have going for us in a movie like this is that it, like, even here we are 30 years later, we have no expectation of it to look any different than it looks.
Yeah.
Like, this film is going to age well. It's part of a category of films that's going to age well because our cultural expectation of post-Soviet Union Russia is that it looks like this. And so that's, both a disservice to the country, which actually does. It was filmed in color that isn't gray and green, but that's what we're saddled with as sort of a sense memory of it.
Yeah, right.
Music, Eduard Artemev.
I thought the music worked. I can't recall it now, but it worked in context of the film.
Atmospheric, less thematic.
Yes, exactly.
Well, we are, as you say, they didn't make any sequels. We got no budget. We already talked about the big award?
No,
Were
actually,
there more than that?
there were a few awards that it did
right.
garner. At the Chicago Film Festival in 1989, it ended up winning the Gold Hugo Award for the Best International Feature Film. At the Valladolid International Film Festival, 98, it won the Silver Prize. And I already said that Shakhnazarov did win that European Science Fiction Society Award. And interestingly, this film was submitted as the Soviet entry for the Best Foreign Language Film for the 62nd Academy Awards. It didn't end up getting accepted as a nominee, but I think that speaks interestingly that even at the time, the Soviet, I'm still always somewhat unclear, and I'm surprised we didn't really talk or try to figure out more of this when we did our Best Foreign Language Films or Foreign Language Films nominated for Best Picture series. Who is it who's really picking the film that is going to be representative of that year when they submit to the Academy Awards for any particular year? I'm curious who that body was, especially for in the world of the Soviets. This was submitted, but it didn't get accepted. So that would have been interesting to see had it been.
The advocacy group that is didn't exist at the time that was doing this, like Mosfilm. What is the Russian Film Institute? Was, I think, new, but without the censorship board reviewing and picking films, that's who I imagine. I imagine this would go all the way up to Gorbachev, right? So he's going to pick the film to go represent the country. Yeah,
right. I wonder how that was determined. I just don't know.
Well, I'm thrilled we watched it, even if it doesn't fit quite so handily in our Soviet sci-fi series. It was a delightful movie to watch for me. It was a great experience, and maybe we should rank it.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really fun movie. It was such a weird movie. I think that's why I enjoyed watching it. Like, I was never bored. It was always like, wow, what is around the next corner? Something interesting and strange. And I didn't understand it after it ended, but I did really grasp more after I read more about it. So I'm glad I watched it. Really interesting film. And yes, let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You'll see all the movies we've talked about on this very show. If you swipe over in your show notes, tap the word Flickchart, it should take you straight to City Zero in the Flickchart database, where you can add it to your list and see how it stacks up against ours.
And in Flickchart, it is listed in Russian as Zerograd.
Zerograd.
So Zerograd or the Birdcage.
Zerograd.
Yeah, I will pick that as well. Zerograd or Seven Samurai.
Oh,
Seven Samurai.
Yeah, Seven Samurai.
Zerograd or Interstellar. I'm going.
Probably Interstellar.
Yeah, definitely Interstellar. Zerograd or Sunshine.
Sunshine.
Yeah, I'll go Sunshine. Zerograd or the Lavender Hill Mob.
Zerograd.
Really? I'm going to say Lavender Hill Mob.
All right.
Let's do it. Ready?
Let's do it. 1,
2, 3. Paper. Rock.
I cover your rock.
Zerograd takes it. Zerograd or True Romance.
True Romance.
True Romance. Zerograd or Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street.
Sweeney Todd.
Sweeney Todd, indeed. Zerograd or Adaptation.
Adaptation.
Adaptation. Zerograd or Gone Girl.
Gone Girl.
Let's say Gone Girl. That lands Zerograd in spot 228 on our chart. 228 out of 488 lands it at a 53%.
That's too low, frankly. You thought otherwise, sir.
Apparently, I thought exactly the same thing because
Really?
I landed in spot 2125 out of 4550, which is also a 53%.
Wow. Okay. Well, clearly I landed on some easy choices, and it gave Zero Grad a real leg up on my list. I landed at 179 out of 1484, which is
Wow.
an 88%.
Holy cow.
If I am to go by the algorithm here and head over to letterboxd.com/thenextreel, this should be rated, according to Flickchart, a 4.5-star movie for me. I had a great time. I'm torn on 4.5 stars. I think when I finished the movie, I said, well, that's a 4-star and a heart. Easy. I had a great time with this movie. I don't know if it's a 4.5-star movie. I don't know if I want it up there quite so high.
Well, if I were to rank it according to mine, it would be a 2.5 star, which is definitely too low for me. But I have a hard time going above 3.5. So I'm going to do 3.5 with a heart.
Oh, well, you just cinched it for me. It's a 4.5 with a heart.
I knew if I did that, you were going to go on the high end. So that's funny.
Spite ranking.
You sure are. Well, that puts it at 4 stars and a heart over on our chart on Letterboxd. And this is the end of the Soviet science fiction series that you put together. But I will say this has been a fascinating glimpse into a genre or just a world of film that I have not looked at before. And I certainly would be game to jump back into this world with some other films down the road.
Oh, and there was the list we came up with was fantastic. And now that we've kind of dipped our toes into some of these movies, I'm super interested to moving further into the 90s, frankly, but there is a lot of territory in the 70s and 80s that we have access to thanks to YouTube and rights confusion, and it's great. Easy one to play
What was
with.
that one that I was pushing for? Amphibian Man?
Amphibian Man. There was Amphibian Man. I think there was another one, Kunzaza, that was another one that was supposedly very good. Yeah, it's a great list, so...
Yeah, lots of stuff to watch. So hopefully we shall return to it in the future. But next, we are actually going to be looking at some kind of a period in Oliver Stone's career. We're looking at Oliver Stone in the 80s, both as a writer-director and writer-director, and really the journey that he took from kind of the early in his career through the point where he really kind of became Oliver Stone and was making what we would call Oliver Stone films.
This is the Oliver Stone origin story series. It is.
I guess you could call it that, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be fun. We're starting with The Hand from 1981, and we're going all the way through Born on the 4th of July in 1989.
That's a lot of films.
10 films. It's a hefty series.
Busy boy.
Should be an interesting exploration when the movie ends.
Our conversation begins. Letterboxd giveth, Andrew.
As Letterboxd always doeth.
Okay. I am spoiled on yours, and so I'm going to go ahead and go first.
Okay.
I feel like we need to end on screaming. And I will not be screaming. I actually have a pair of Letterboxd reviews that are very short. The first one is from Jay Matthias, who says, like Kafka doing Inherent Vice, a bureaucratic nightmare wrapped in a freewheeling absurdity that can't stop making excuses for its endless nonsense. A poignant meditation on the decline and death of the Soviet Union, if you're inclined to read it that way. I like that just because he likens it to Kafka doing Inherent Vice. That's funny to me. And I think that idea of making excuses for endless nonsense, I didn't see it that way, but I can see how somebody would. Which takes me to MJ Nichols, who gives it 3 stars and says, it's mildly absurdist and satirical comedy that promises more oddness than it delivers. Somebody who wants a little bit more of your Lynch. Andy.
More Lynch, more strange people dancing in boxes and whatnot.
Right.
Okay. All right. Well, I've got a one that doesn't have a star rating, but Charming Potato sure screamed this review watching it back in 2020. I do not know how to describe this movie without caps lock. Even then, all I got is, whoa, what, hey, now, holy wow, yikes, holy goddamn hell, WTF. I think this might be a masterpiece, but I also feel like I spent an hour inhaling paint fumes. Thank you, Charming Potato.
Thanks, Letterboxd. It's hard to believe we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a lot of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchase is made through our links. Give us a small commission at no extra cost to you, and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
We covered a lot of great movies that were adapted from other material in Season 10.
Our Originals page at thenextreel.com/originals is where listeners can purchase the source material behind all our adapted film discussions. It helps support the show at no extra cost when you buy through our links.
In our foreign language Best Picture nominees series, we looked at several adaptations, including Z, The Postman Il Postino, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Letters from Iwo Jima.
We hit the high seas with In the Heart of the Sea from Nathaniel Philbrick's nonfiction book for our Aquatic Killers series.
Definitely a weaker entry in that series.
I bet the book is better.
Oh, me too.
Member bonus episodes featured adaptations like Gone Girl, The Russia House, Ivanhoe, The Hot Rock, The Big Heat, and Naked Lunch.
Oliver Stone brought not just original stories, but also adaptations like Conan the Barbarian, Scarface, Year of the Dragon, 8 Million Ways to Die, Talk Radio, and Born on the 4th of July.
Mary Herron's disturbingly insightful American Psycho was adapted from the Bret Easton Ellis book.
You like Huey Lewis in the News?
Oh my God, it even has a watermark.
And of course, more Stephen King with The Mist, The Green Mile, and The Shawshank Redemption for our King a la Darabont series.
Find links to all of these books and more adapted films on our Originals page. That's thenextreel.com/originals. Every purchase supports our show.
Get the full list of books that we've talked about and start your next read today at thenextreel.com/originals.